Hey everyone, Chris here. 5 years ago, I created and presented one of my favorite builds that I called the Eternal Cockroach. Concept was simple: make a character that is really hard to kill. It utilized what I consider the best defensive options that were available at the time to get a mix of the highest armor class, hit points, and saving throws that I could figure out, along with a long list of immunities and resistances. I recently revisited older builds in a tier ranking series, and one thing I thought of in terms of the Eternal Cockroach is it made use of legacy content which might not be available for a number of viewers in 2024. I also wondered how much content from releases since making this build might have fit into the build and into the concept, so I decided I would make an updated version. This is that video. So if you are hoping for a build that does the most damage possible, or obliterates swarms of enemies, this isn't going to be the build you're looking for. Once I reworked the build using the current rule set, I found myself steering towards three main pillars. First pillar, I want this character to make its saving throws. Not like most of the time. I mean, if it's an important save, I want to be basically certain I'll make it. I do not want to get paralyzed, I do not want to get stunned, I do not want to get incapacitated, and I do not want to get petrified, like ever. Second pillar, I want to be hard to hit. Nat 20s happen, but I don't want monsters, even powerful ones at higher levels, to be able to hit me when they roll a 10. At lower levels, that's actually a piece of cake, but at higher levels, when you get to those plus 17s and plus 18s to hit, it's actually quite difficult. Not impossible, though, and I'll show you one way to do it. Third pillar, when I do take damage, I want to remain conscious. I don't want to go to 0 hit points. That involves a combination of base hit points, hit point increases, temporary hit points, and damage resistance against those big hits. And I think I've come up with a build that embodies these three pillars. Now, if you watch this channel regularly, you know making my saving throws is pretty much always a priority for me. You might also have noticed that I stopped doing sponsored videos about 1.5 years ago. It's not that I don't get offered sponsorships, I just find that I don't really like making the advertisements, and I find the whole interaction somewhat awkward, even if I support the product. I mean, here you are supporting me by watching my video. Now here's a product I'm going to try to convince you to buy despite not really knowing much about it. But you know what? They paid me to sell it to you. On the other hand, that is a lot of potential income I'm not taking advantage of, so I've decided I would start sponsoring my own videos. So the Eternal Cockroach is brought to you thanks to my sponsor, Tree Monk's Temple. You can go to the Tree Monk's Temple Patreon, which is linked in the video description, and for as little as $3 a month, watch videos early and before they're monetized through YouTube. I assume that's a good deal because they're sponsoring my video. And Tree Monk's Temple is offering you this great free offer. A free subscription to Tree Monk's Temple brings these videos to your subscription page at absolutely no cost to you. And Tree Monk's Temple is committed to keeping this option absolutely free to you. Seriously though, I've been hovering between 50 and 100,000 subscribers for a long time. And with your help, if I get to 100,000, YouTube sends this cool silver button to Tree Monk's Temple. That would be fantastic. So thanks, Tree Monk's Temple, for sponsoring this video. Back to the Eternal Cockroach. So a lot of things stay the same as the 2019 Eternal Cockroach, but there are a number of notable updates. One thing that hasn't changed is I think this is a pretty good build from levels 2 through 16, and I think it's pretty decent actually above level 16, but at level 1, I gotta admit, it's not very good. That hasn't changed. If you're going to be joining a campaign and you expect to be level 1 for a long time, and you want to play the Eternal Cockroach, it will be frustrating. But as soon as you get to level 2, it's going to be fine. By the way, I'm linking the fully leveled up character in the video description. It'll go up to level 16, so if you want to check that out, feel free, though I would appreciate if you watch the video as well. I'm going to explain how it works and why I made the decisions that I did. When I started playing around with the build concept, I started thinking of ways to pile on as many damage resistances as possible through both race and feat selections. But you know what? I discovered there are too many damage types for this to be really viable or reliable as a main source of defense. So then I was going to give up on resistances and have the build cast Warning Bond on itself for the armor class and saving throw bonuses. With this strategy, you technically are applying resistance to all damage, so then you actually want to avoid other sources of damage resistance, and I even did a video covering this non-intuitive use of the Warding Bond spell, and I was informed that Jeremy Crawford said you couldn't do it. Now, I'll be the first to tell you that a tweet from Jeremy Crawford is not a rule. That said, I myself often refer to remarks Jeremy Crawford has said to help me adjudicate the rules when I'm a DM, and a lot of viewers probably have DMs that do the same thing. So I've decided not to go that route because I think a lot of DMs might not allow it. And if I don't go that route, it does change the build decisions. So this version of the Eternal Cockroach that I'm about to present, I think is going to be a pretty safe build to bring to your table without accessing sourcebooks, spells, feats, or races that aren't going to be allowed at many tables, or use interactions that aren't going to be allowed. Since multitasking and feats are technically optional rules, I will mention this build makes extensive use of both multiclassing and feats, so if that is a problem, then this build isn't for you. Let's start with our racial selection, and I'm actually going to give you two options here depending on your priorities. Then I will pick one of them based on my priorities. So we start with Srcr. So in addition to fitting really well into this build concept, Srcr is simply one of the most powerful races in the game right now. You get Dark Vision, Fey Ancestry for advantage on saving throws against a charm condition, a free perception skill proficiency, Elven Trance, including 2 extra weapon or tool proficiencies that you can swap out with a long rest, but the big one is Blessing of the Raven Queen. So this allows you to use your bonus action to teleport, which isn't particularly unique, but when you do it, starting at 3rd level, you also get resistance to all damage types until the start of your next turn. A tactic I've seen many times with Srcr is you use the bonus action to teleport even when you don't need to teleport, just to get the resistance, because the player is expecting their character to potentially take a lot of damage before their next turn, and then they will get resistance to all of the damage. Blessing of the Raven Queen is usable the standard proficiency bonus times per long rest. I really think that reducing damage some of the time, but all kinds of damage, and at times chosen by you, is better than resistance to 1 or 2 damage types all the time, available with other racial options. And that on top of the teleport, which is super useful, along with the other features, makes Srcr the best option for this build if you want to focus mainly on damage reduction. If you want to focus more on saving throws, then Hobgoblin is the best choice. So Hobgoblin also gets Dark Vision. They also get Fey Ancestry with the advantage on saving throws against a charm condition. They get a nice feature called Fey Gift. This allows the Hobgoblin to take the help action using a bonus action a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, yada yada yada. And when you use the help action this way, starting at 3rd level, you add another little bonus. You can give a d6 plus your proficiency bonus and temporary hit points to both yourself and the creature you helped. That's going to be 5 or 6 on average at level 3 and max out around 9 or 10 at level 17. Or you can give yourself and the other creature a walking speed bonus of 10 until the start of your next turn. That can be okay. Or you can impose disadvantage on an attack of an enemy. Whichever one the creature you helped with this hits with an attack first. It doesn't even need to be the attack you help with, so if they miss with the attack with advantage, they still might impose the penalty. And this is a nice feature, but it's not why you pick Hobgoblin with the Eternal Cockroach. This is the reason. Fortune from the Many. So it's usable the standard amount of times, and when you miss with an attack or fail an ability check, you could use Fortune from the Many, but you won't, right? Because what we want is when we fail a saving throw, we can add a bonus, maybe turning it into a success. That bonus is going to be equal to the number of allies that you can see within 30 feet, and it's up to +3. And it's almost always going to be a +3, and there's no action required here, so it can be combined with any other saving throw bonus, even if it uses a reaction, which will matter. The other race that gets something similar to this is the Autonome, and Built for Success, but with the Autonome, it's a D4, which means that if you fail by more than 1, you don't know if the feature is going to change the result. But with Hobgoblin, we know the bonus before we add it. And as I said, normally it's going to be a +3. So in terms of saving throw boosts, I think this is the better option. And just to be transparent with the process, yes, I did consider races with magic resistance, but magic resistance in the current rules either applies to spells only, or it only applies to saving throws for certain ability scores. I think the +3 on any saving throw that we find important to make the save is the better pick. I also think proficiency bonus times per long rest may not cover every failed saving throw, though it often will, but it should cover every failed important saving throw that is missed by 3 or less. And despite what I said earlier, if you're higher level and your proficiency bonus is higher, you can pretty much safely use this to turn a miss into a hit or a failed ability check into a success, as long as you keep in mind that the primary reason this race was chosen for this build was to have this available when you need it for an important saving throw. And yes, of course, I value my saving throws over reducing damage, so Hobgoblin is my selection for this build. But if you choose Shatter Kai, I'm not going to judge you, at least publicly. Okay, so ability scores. I'm going to be taking the +2/+1 option, and I'm going to put the +2 in Charisma and the +1 in Constitution. And just like the original Eternal Cockroach, I've put a 13 in Strength, and this character will be wearing full plate armor. And 13 doesn't meet the minimum strength requirements for full plate. And on that video in 2019, I had all kinds of wacky comments about suffering the effects of not being proficient in armor, or that you weren't allowed to wear armor with a higher strength requirement than you have. And so I am going to show you the actual rule here. This is right from the player's handbook. It says, heavy armor. Heavier armor interferes with the wearer's ability to move quickly, stealthily, and freely. If the armor table shows strength 13 or strength 15 in the strength column for an armor type, the armor reduces the wearer's speed by 10 feet unless the wearer has a strength score equal or higher than the listed score. That's it. There's no, you can't cast spells if you don't meet the strength requirement, or you can't wear it at all, or disadvantage on attacks, saving throws, and ability checks. None of that. You get a 10-foot movement penalty. And we've already seen one way this character can offset that penalty, at least temporarily. All we gotta do is take the help action as a bonus action for a +10 movement. But trust me, I'm not ignoring this or discounting this. We are not going to be slow. In fact, eventually we're actually going to be fairly quick, even while wearing full plate without the strength requirement. I guarantee it. But if it is an issue for you, then you would need to drop the dexterity to 8 and switch the +1 Constitution ratio bonus to strength, and you can get a 15, which is enough to meet the strength requirement of full plate. I just don't think it's worth it, so I'm not going to recommend it. Okay, so our first level is in Paladin. By the way, I'm not going to spend time going over skill proficiencies or background. Take what you want. I mostly focus on charisma stuff since that is our primary score. Paladin is giving us 12 starting hit points, which is pretty good. We get Divine Sense, which I'm not even going to bother to explain. It's not very good. And Lay on Hands, which is fairly good. We get a pool of 5 hit points we can heal with, or use all 5 to neutralize a poison or cure a disease. And for each Paladin level we get, the pool increases by 5. We will be adding Paladin levels to this character, at least 5 more, maybe 7 more. We'll talk about that later. Now, the reason we're taking Paladin with our first level is for the proficiency in all armors and shields. If you want Constitution saving throw proficiency, you could take the Srcr dip that we're going to be taking later at level 1, but then when you multiclass into Paladin, you're not going to get heavy armor proficiency, just medium armor proficiency. And if this character used medium armor, we would have to completely rework the build to get our dexterity up to 14. That will not be easy. So Paladin at level 1, it's a necessity. We're going to start with Chainmail in the shield, and Chainmail has a 13 strength requirement, which we actually meet. So at this point, we have no movement penalty. But assuming we switch to plate armor, at some point, we eventually will. And I mentioned this before, but essentially at level 1, we're stuck using weapons with either a +2 or +3 to hit, and a +0 or +1 to damage, which is terrible. So level 2 should come as no surprise. We dip Wrlk, and yes, Hexblade. Now, if you are really against dipping Hexblade, you can take another subclass here, and the build can still work. But you are going to have to find a way to get a second level of Wrlk a whole lot earlier than this one will, because you are going to need to be using Eldritch Blast in combat. And Eldritch Blast isn't very good unless you add Agonizing Blast and Repelling Blast to it, which you will need a second level of Wrlk to do. But with Hexblade, we can get away with a 1 level dip in Wrlk at least for now. We're going to have a one-handed weapon, and we can apply Hex Weapon to it, and now we will use Charisma for attacks and damage. And as a level 2 melee character, we'll be decent. We should be doing similar damage to other characters, and we have a solid armor class. Speaking of armor class, let's talk spells. So we're going to get 2 cantrips, and as I mentioned, we will be going back to Wrlk later, not till much later though, but we might as well pick up Eldritch Blast. It's crappy cantrip damage, but we are going to have a ton of cantrips with this character. Our best range attack though is actually going to be Magic Stone, at least until level 5. So we can cast this as a bonus action. We get 3 magic pebbles that we can make a ranged spell attack with up to 60 feet away for a d6 plus 3 damage. It's the best long range damage that we can get at this level. For first level spells, we're going to grab Armor of Agathys and Shield. And at level 2, we're probably using our pack slot for Shield. Assuming we still have Chainmail and the Shield, that's 18 armor class or 23 after casting Shield. And you know what? Nothing wrong with that. And I've grabbed a Warhammer, which we'll be attacking with for plus 5 to hit and d8 plus 3 damage. And that's okay. And we have the d6 plus 3 damage at range with Magic Stone. So offensively, we're still not great, but at least now we're doing okay. Alright, now we're going to go back to Pldn, and we're going to take another 5 levels in a row. That's going to bring us to level 6 in Pldn, level 7 overall for the character. So our fighting style should be obvious. We're going to take Defense, of course. That's a plus 1 to armor class. We're going to get Divine Smite. I'm going to assume you all know what that does. Now, if you go the Eldritch Blast route, you're not going to be able to use Divine Smite. But with the recommended build, this gives us a burst damage option, and we're going to have a good supply of spell slots to fuel it. Now, here's a change from the 2019 build. We will be taking the Watcher subclass. With the original, I took Oath of the Ancients, which at level 7 has a good protective feature, but with Watchers, we get a good defensive feature at level 3 in Pldn. So we have 2 Channel Divinity options. By the way, it's 1 Channel Divinity per short rest. Abjure the Extraplanar is a lot like a Cleric's Turn Undead, but it doesn't work on Undead. Instead, it works on a bunch of different creature types: Aberrations, Celestials, Elementals, Fae, and Fiends. It's a solid feature. But here's the one that works especially well on this build. Watcher's Will allows us, as an action, to pick a number of creatures up to our Charisma modifier, which is 3 now, but it's eventually going to be 5. And we're going to pick ourselves as one of the targets, of course, and everyone affected has advantage on all Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma saving throws. Of those, Wisdom is the most common, but if a Mind Flayer hits you with a Mind Blast, advantage on Intelligence saves is going to come in handy. And that Charisma bonus is about to become a plus 4 because we get an ability score improvement. My original plan was to take Guile of the Cloud Giant, which would provide a plus 1 Charisma boost as well as resistance on all attack damage plus a teleport as a reaction a limited number of times per day. It was a perfect feat for this build, really, but unfortunately it also has a feat prerequisite this build does not have. However, I do want to mention that if you are allowed to use the backgrounds in Big B Presents Glory of the Giants, you can get the prerequisite feat as part of that background. You just select the Cloud Giant option, and then this is the feat you should select at level 4 in Pldn. However, for this build, I'm going to assume that those backgrounds are not available. So the next best feat option is Fey Touched. This is going to give us a plus 1 Charisma, which increases all our saving throws, as well as all those of our allies within 10 feet. It increases our spell save DC, it gives us an additional spell preparation, and it improves our to hit and damage with our Warhammer attack. So that plus 1 to Charisma does a lot of heavy lifting. It's also going to allow us to pick up the Misty Step spell, giving us a teleport option, and for the additional spell, I'm recommending Compelled Duel. This spell imposes disadvantage on the target to attack anyone else but you, and creates difficulty in moving over 30 feet away from you. We're also going to have the ability to cast both Misty Step and Compelled Duel once per long rest for free. Normally, Compelled Duel is not a great spell, but when you want to do some tanking, it does incentivize attacking the Eternal Cockroach over our more vulnerable allies. Then we're going to get extra attack at level 5, which of course is great. And of course the crown jewel of class features, Aura of Protection. With an 18 charisma, that's a +4 to all of our saving throws, as well as the saving throws of allies within 10 feet. With spells, we have Alarm, Detect Magic, Moonbeam, and See Invisibility. Those are gained through our subclass. Admittedly, that's not exactly the list I would pick, so let's pick some spells. So for level 1 spells, I grab Bless, that's a good spell, and another way to add even more to saving throws. Command, a great spell for upcasting, and we're going to have higher level spell slots with this character. Shield of Faith, which is just a bonus action to cast, and if we want the highest armor class possible, well, that'll be another +2. And Wrathful Smite, which is also a bonus action, and it's also the best smite spell for its level. The thing is that a creature that fails its saving throw is frightened, and to end the condition, it needs to use an action, and that is only going to give it a wisdom ability check, and the frightened condition gives disadvantage on all ability checks. So ending the frightened condition is really hard. For level 2 spells, I picked up Aid, which is a good spell, but also a way to increase our hit point maximum. The scaling is good as well, and we can share the benefits with 2 other creatures. And I should mention that if you increase your hit point maximum, and if you add temporary hit points, those are not the same thing. That means we can stack this with a source of temporary hit points. That's something I'll be talking about more later. And Find Steed, which is one absolute must-pick for Paladin 2nd level spells. Warhorse has a base speed of 60, so if we're suffering a movement penalty from our armor, which we eventually will be, well, if we're mounted, that doesn't matter at all. We're still way faster than anyone in the party. And so at level 7, we have a character with some decent spells, decent attacks with extra attack and Hexblade's Curse, and Smite if we need to Nova some damage. So this is a decent character, but here's where we see the defense of the Eternal Cockroach starting to rise above the other characters. Every saving throw has a decent bonus. We can get advantage on any of the mental saves. We can add D4s through Bless. We can add a +3 from Fortune of the Many. And we're not at a point where we can guarantee success yet, but these saves are far superior to the average 7th level character. Then, armor class. So we have an armor class of 21 with no magic items. Shield of Faith can add +2, the shield spell can add +5, and yes, Shield of Faith and shield can stack for +7, so we could get that up to 28 if we need. Our average challenge rating 7 monster is hitting with a +6, so they'd pretty much need to crit. As for hit points, they're not bad for level 7. We can boost them with Aid and Armor of Agathis, but I'm going to come back to those spells later when we have some higher level slots. Speaking of which, let's go Wizard 2 for 2 levels, and we're going to of course grab War Magic. So we get Arcane Recovery, which is okay, and Tactical Wit is going to give us a +1 to initiative, and we're going to get a bunch of first level spells and cantrips. Here's what I recommend. For cantrips, we get Mage Hand, Message, Minor Illusion. I won't spend a lot of time on these. Mage Hand is like a short-range minor telekinetic power, Message allows secret communication with allies, and Minor Illusion lets you make a little illusion. All of these are solid cantrips, even when your casting stat is a 13. Then, first level spells. So we're going to get 6 at Wizard 1, and 2 more at Wizard 2, so here's what I took. So it doesn't matter how high your armor class is. Sometimes you're going to take damage from spells or breath weapons or other kinds of effects. Those usually are elemental types of damage, and Absorb Elements is going to allow us to gain resistance to a number of those damage types as a reaction. It is a very good defensive spell and really appropriate for this build. Then, Longstrider. So Longstrider has a nice upcast option, and it gives us a +10 movement speed for an hour. What's our armor speed penalty? That's right, 10 feet. So Longstrider completely negates our speed penalty at any time that we're not mounted. This is why I figure the 15 strength is just not a necessity on this build. With Longstrider and our Racial Fae gift, we can bump up to a speed of 40 when needed, even in full plate. And now let's talk about our third spell that we're actually going to prepare. The best option is Silvery Barbs. So if Silvery Barbs is allowed in your game, that is the best choice. If it isn't, then prepare Featherfall, which in my opinion is the next best option. So I have put Silvery Barbs on the build, but if you can't take it, it's no problem. Just take Featherfall instead, and you're going to be fine. And that is all we can prepare. So the next 5 picks are all rituals, which wizards don't need to prepare. So we have Alarm, Comprehend Languages, Detect Magic, Find Familiar, and Unseen Servant. Now, if you are observant, you will probably notice that I have now taken Alarm and Detect Magic twice, because they were auto picks with Watcher's Pldn. Here's the thing, we can't cast them ritually through Pldn, so they're worth picking again through Wizard for that option. Okay, back to the subclass features. So the main reason to go War Wizard, which isn't an easy multiclass for Warlock Paladins, is to get Arcane Deflection. This is almost a must for this kind of character. As a reaction, when we're hit by an attack or we fail a saving throw, we can use our reaction to get a +2 bonus to armor class against that attack, or a +4 bonus to the saving throw. When we use this feature, we can't cast spells other than cantrips until the end of our next turn, and that is not really a problem for us because we're a weapon user and we're not really a primary caster, so we probably weren't casting any leveled spells on that turn anyways. The +2 bonus to armor class can be occasionally useful. Shield is just better, but Shield uses a spell slot. This does not. So if a +2 is enough, and you aren't expecting any further attacks before your next turn, this is going to be the better option, as it's going to save you on resources. The main thing, though, is the +4 to saving throws. Yeah, it does require our reaction, which is why I pointed out that Fortune from the Many doesn't use a reaction, meaning you can use them both on the same saving throw. Same goes with Bless, by the way. And so our saving throws now are really stacked. We will have additional bonuses to saving throws later on this build, but it's mostly there right now. But we are going to leave Wizard, and it is time for Bard. This is really going to juice up our spell slots because we're going to be taking 5 levels. This is going to make us a 14th level character with 10 levels in spellcasting, not counting pack magic. So we're going to have 4th and 5th level spell slots with no 4th or 5th level spells. But we have a plan for them, and I'm going to get back to that. We're going to get a musical instrument and a skill proficiency, pick whatever works for your character. Jack of Trades is nice, we add half our proficiency bonus to all ability checks we aren't proficient in, and yes, that does include initiative rolls, as well as dispel magic checks. We're going to get expertise in 2 skills, again, pick what you like. We're going to get an ability score improvement, and importantly, we can get our charisma up to 20. That is a +1 to all saving throws for us and allies in range. We get another use of Bardic Inspiration, which will be important, and our spell DCs for Warlock, Paladin, and Bard maxes out. It actually also gives us preparation of another Paladin spell, and I would recommend protection from poison, yet another line of defense that doesn't require concentration. And our subclass, which matches up with the 2019 build, is Swords. It's just still the best here. Fighting Style Dueling gives us +2 damage on our weapon attack, so that's a nice little offensive boost. But Swords is chosen for this. Blade Flourish. Specifically, Defensive Flourish. So when we take the attack action on our turn, which will be most turns, our walking speed increases by 10 feet. Look at that. Even with the armor penalty, that is 40 feet of movement. 50 feet with the bonus action. So if we're on a mount, we're super fast. And if we aren't, we're still pretty fast, even in full plate without the strength requirement. And if we hit with a weapon attack, we can do a defensive flourish up to once on our turn. If we do that, we expend a Bardic Inspiration die. Then we roll it, we add an amount of extra damage to the attack equal to the roll, and our armor class increases by that result until the start of our next turn. At level 5, that's a D8. Also note that the +10 speed bonus does not require the inspiration. It only applies if we want the damage and armor class boost. And going hand in hand with this is Font of Inspiration. This is why we really need 5 levels in Bard to make the most of Defensive Flourish. This allows us to recover all 5 inspiration uses after a short rest. This means if we're willing to use our inspiration on Defensive Flourish, and let's face it, that's why we're taking Bard in this subclass, well then we can probably use it on most turns that we have in combat. If you want to use your inspiration traditionally, go ahead, or mix it up if you like. But if you want maximum defensive focus, use it on Defensive Flourish as the standard. A D8 armor class boost for an entire round is excellent, and it's not using our reaction, so yes, it combines with Shield, and it's not using our concentration, so yes, it combines with Shield of Faith, so we can in theory have all 3 going at once, and that is not far-fetched. Okay, so let's go through spells. For cantrips, I recommend Friends, Light, and Mending. They're all useful spells. For first level spells, I picked Healing Word and Tasha's Hideous Laughter. They're both good spells. For second level, Heat Metal, Lesser Restoration, Mirror Image, and Silence. Heat Metal is circumstantial, but it's great when it comes up. Lesser Restoration, same thing. Mirror Image isn't concentration, so it allows another layer of defense, and I did a video on it recently, which I'll link up above. And Silence is especially good on a caster that's not necessarily casting spells in combat. Then third level spells, I've got Dispel Magic and Hypnotic Pattern. So when we do want to cast spells in combat, we have some options that are pretty strong even at higher levels, and we will be able to spare the slots. So here's how the Bard is making the Eternal Cockroach even more indestructible. So we're sitting on that base armor class of 21. If we cast Shield of Faith, that's 23. And I figure there's probably one of two spells we want to be concentrating on most of the time in combat. Either Shield of Faith or Bless. The advantage of Shield of Faith is it's a bonus action to cast, and it lasts longer. The advantage of Bless is that we're also affecting 2 additional allies. We get the D4 bonus to both attacks as well as to saving throws. But most of the time I'd be expecting to concentrate on one or the other, unless I want to cast like a bigger combat spell, like a Hypnotic Pattern. And I'll gladly drop the concentration on the Shield of Faith to apply the concentration on Hypnotic Pattern. That's not a problem. But 23 with Shield of Faith, 28 if we have that and a shield spell, and up to 36 with Defensive Flourish. It might also be a 29. So with full armor class boost, we're talking between 29 and 36. That means on average, we'll be sitting in the area of 32 armor class to 33. That is with no magical item boosts whatsoever. Take a plus 17 to hit. That means if it multi-attacks 4 times, it's probably going to hit once. Even without Shield of Faith and a reaction for shield, it might hit twice. But we would have resistance to the first hit, and it might not be able to attack after that. And that's if we don't have mirror images. So without magic items, that's pretty much as high as you're going to get your armor class at this level. Then look at saves. We can add a plus 3 if we fail, and we can add a plus 4 as a reaction if we fail, so that's plus 7, meaning it's actually more like a plus 12 to plus 21 when it's an important save, and that's assuming we don't also have a bless spell up. And no, we don't have proficiency in constitution saves, which are concentration saves, but the reason that's such a priority for a primary caster is you want that constitution saving throw to get to a plus 9 so that you don't need to make saving throws for damage of 21 or less. Well, we don't have plus 9, but with a plus 7, we're okay 90% of the time, and 100% of the time if we're willing to burn a resource or have a reaction free. So I'm not too worried about it. And when we attack, it's plus 10 with the Warhammer, d8 plus 7 damage, we have extra attack, plus another d8 from Defensive Flourish on 1 hit per round, and that's just our standard. If we want to burst damage, well, we can burn spell slots on smites, and we can apply Hexblade's Curse, and that's not going to give us top level damage because this isn't a damage build, but it ain't bad. But we should talk about spell slots, because we have plenty of first, second, and third level spell slots and good spells to use them with, or we could use them for smites. But we also have 3 4th level slots and 2 5th level slots, so what should we do with them? For one of the 4th level slots, I recommend Aid. That's 15 additional maximum hit points, so we're up to 121 at level 14. There's nothing wrong with that. And then with one of the 5th level slots, I recommend Armor of Agathis. So that's 25 temporary hit points. So we're actually up to 146 at 14th level. That is more than 10 hit points per level. That's pretty high. Oh, and for both Aid and Armor of Agathis, we definitely want to include our mount. So if we are casting Aid, we're picking 3 targets. We'll be one of the targets, and our mount will be the second. And when we cast Armor of Agathis, assuming we're talking about Fine Steed through Pldn, as long as we're mounted, that spell is shared with the mount, so they get another 25, so they'll have an additional 40 hit points. And whenever a creature hits us with a melee attack while we still have hit points from Armor of Agathis, or hit our mount for that matter, they take 25 cold damage. So let's say for a moment, hypothetically, that we're in combat and an enemy hits us with a melee attack for 30 points of damage. Well, if we cast Shield, we might make them miss, which is great. But if we take the hit, we take 30 points of damage, but they take 25, though our Armor of Agathis is going to be gone. So you have to consider each time you take damage independently. Maybe just take the hit, maybe use Arcane Deflection, maybe cast Shield, because in specific situations, any of them might be your best option. But you're going to have a lot of defensive options to choose from. Now, if you finish a combat and your Armor of Agathys is gone, I would expand another high-level spell slot to cast it again. So the 2019 Eternal Cockroach had 4 classes multi-classed, so let's achieve 5. So we're going to take a Sorcerer dip, and yes, Divine Soul Sorcerer, and Favored by the Gods. That is a 2d4 boost to a failed saving throw once per short rest. So for saving throws, we have a flat +5 to all of them through Aura of Protection, then another +3 as needed with Fortune of the Many, that's +8 total, then another +4 when needed as a reaction from Arcane Deflection, no resource cost there, and that's +12 total, and then another 2d4 once per short rest from Favored by the Gods, that's +5 on average, or +17 total. As in +17 up and beyond our regular ability score bonuses and saving throw proficiencies. Failing saving throws, in D&D is fairly common. Failing a saving throw by like 18, that is pretty rare. I would say by this point that if you miss a saving throw and it's really important, you shouldn't need to fail it. Period, with this character. And we're going to get some more spells, so I guess we'll grab Control Flames, Guidance, Shape Water, and Word of Radiance. And then for first level spells, I like Featherfall if we haven't taken it already. If you already have it, because Silvery Barbs wasn't allowed, take whatever. And I also suggest Sanctuary. That's a good option. These are very much like gravy. We have such a fantastic and huge list of low-level spells with this character. There's so many to choose from. Alright, so let's check out our spell slots. You can see we now have a 6th level spell slot, so we can use that to cast Armor of Agathys. That's going to give us 30 temporary hit points. And then it frees up that 5th level slot for casting Aid, so that's now going to give us 20 additional maximum hit points. So we're actually sitting at 162 effective hit points at 15th level without taking the tough feat. That's pretty high. And I want to discuss levels 16 through 20, although I didn't apply them to this character sheet. And the reason I didn't is because defensively, I think the Eternal Cockroach is basically at its pinnacle here at 15th level. There are other defensive boosts we could add, though none of them are as dramatic as what we've already done. But what I do want to provide is some guidance for what I would do for those final levels. So we have 5 additional levels for this character. One thing I would do is I would add 2 additional levels of Pldn. I think that can be quite good. We're going to raise the caster level of the build by 1. Get initiative boosting aura of the Watcher's Pldn, which is excellent. Though keep in mind, it's not going to stack with our Jack of all trades. So as far as our character is concerned, it's just adding that other half of the proficiency bonus. But for the rest of the party, it's a big bonus. And an 8th level in Pldn provides another ability score increase. Now, we could take the Resilient feat if we wanted to, but I just don't think it's necessary. So I might choose something else. I think I would actually go for the Lucky feat. And the Lucky feat, of course, is very versatile, can be used in all kinds of situations, but one thing this character doesn't have is a way to negate crits. That would give them a way to negate crits. Then for that 3rd level, I would add another level in Warlock. So that would allow us to take Invocations to make our Eldritch Blast pretty effective. Generally, you take Agonizing Blast and Repelling Blast. I did look at Talisman Pact for this character build because they can get a saving throw bonus using their Talisman, but it requires 7 levels in Warlock, and that just was not going to fit on this build. And so if you take Pldn 2 and 1 more level in Warlock, that's going to take you to level 18, and for the final 2 levels, I would go back to Sorcerer. That's going to get us sorcery points and meta magic and increase our caster level by another 2. So that is the way I would go. So Pldn 2, then Warlock 1, then Sorcerer 2 would take this character to level 20. And that is the Eternal Cockroach updated. And if you want a character that is almost never hit in combat and almost never fails a saving throw and can add a whole bevy of bonuses if the saving throw is important, and has a bunch of hit points and punishes enemies who attack them and has an okay attack, then this is your build. If I missed anything or you think there's a better way to build this, let's talk about it in the comments. Otherwise, until next time, I'm going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.